The laughter was the first stone thrown. It was sharp and brittle, and it ricocheted around the crowded living room of my own Cincinnati home, striking me squarely in the chest. I was standing in the doorway, holding a tray of my famous meatloaf sliders, and my daughter Nancy was pointing at me, her face a mask of mortified amusement. "Oh my God, look at what my mom is wearing," she said to her circle of sleek, laughing friends. It's like she stepped straight out of 1985. Her husband, Tyler, my son-in-law, joined in the chorus, his voice dripping with a condescending pity. "Give her a break, babe," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "She's trying her best." My best. I was wearing a simple classic dress, the one I had worn to my own husband's funeral, just a year before. They weren't just mocking my clothes, they were mocking my grief, my age, my very existence. In that single brutal moment, I was no longer a mother, a hostess, the matriarch of the family. I was a punchline, a sad, dowdy relic in their shiny, modern world. They thought my quiet dignity was weakness. They mistook my tolerance for surrender. They had no idea that while they were laughing, I was making a list. And at the top of that list were three things: the car they drove, the will that named them as my heirs, and the keys to the house they had so confidently claimed as their own. They thought the party was about them. They were about to find out it was the beginning of their end. It all started, as these slow-motion devastations so often do, with an act of love, born from a place of profound loss. When my husband, Frank, passed away, the silence in our sprawling two-story house became a living entity. It was a constant, heavy companion that followed me from room to room, a suffocating blanket of grief. I was adrift, in an ocean of loneliness, and the echoes of my life with him were a constant, painful reminder of everything I had lost. Nancy and Tyler, married for just over a year, were living in a cramped, downtown apartment, perpetually complaining about the rent, their student loans, the general injustice of their starter life. My heart ached for them, and for the echoing quiet of my own home. My idea, born from a mother's heart that still yearned to nurture and to fix, seemed like the perfect solution for everyone. I would have company, the sound of life, to fill the dreadful quiet. They would have a beautiful, spacious home, rent-free, a chance to get on their feet. I remember the day I offered it to them, my voice full of a hope that now tastes like ashes in my mouth. "Why don't you move in with me?" I'd said one Sunday over coffee. "There's so much space here. You could save money, get on your feet, and I wouldn't be so alone." Nancy's eyes had lit up, a flicker of something I mistook for daughterly affection, but now recognize as pure opportunism. "Oh, Mom," she'd cooed, "we couldn't possibly impose." Tyler, with his smooth, practiced charm, had sealed the deal. "Margaret, you're a saint. We'll take such good care of you. You've done so much for us. Now it's our turn to look after you." I swallowed their promises like a starving woman. I believed them because I needed to. I needed the noise, the life, the feeling of being a mother again. I helped them move their boxes in, clearing out Frank's old office to make space for their things. I didn't realize I was not just making room for their furniture. I was beginning the slow, painful process of my own erasure. I was a willing participant in the dismantling of my own life, naively believing I was building a new one for us all. The colonization of my home began subtly, with 1,000 small cuts to my identity, each one disguised as an improvement. The first thing to go was Frank's recliner, the worn leather chair, where he had read the paper every morning for 30 years. "It's just so bulky and dated, Mom," Nancy had said, her voice laced with a gentle pity that was more insulting than outright disdain. "We found a much more modern piece that will really open up the living room." The modern piece was a cold, angular sofa that was impossible to get comfortable on. I didn't say anything. I watched the delivery men haul away Frank's chair, a piece of my heart going with it. Next it was the walls, the family photos that lined the hallway, generations of memories, from my wedding day to Nancy's first steps were taken down one by one. We're going for a more minimalist aesthetic, Tyler explained, as he replaced a cherished photo of Frank and me with a generic, mass-produced print of a fern. My history was being curated out of existence, deemed too cluttered for their new, streamlined life. My kitchen, once my undisputed domain, became a battleground. The recipes I had perfected over a lifetime, the dishes Nancy had begged for as a child, were now met with polite disgust. My meatloaf was too heavy. My fried chicken was too greasy. They embarked on a series of trendy, expensive diets, filling my refrigerator with strange, green juices and foods I couldn't pronounce. The comforting aromas of my home were replaced by the smell of steamed kale and simmering resentment. I tried to push back, to hold my ground on the small things. I like my curtains, Nancy, I'd say softly. They were a gift from my grandmother. I know, Mom. And they're lovely, she would reply, her tone making it clear they were anything but they just don't go with the new color palette. We have to think about the overall look of the house. The house, not my house, the house. The language was shifting, and with it the balance of power. Every suggestion I made was met with a patient, weary sigh. Every preference I expressed was treated as a stubborn refusal to get with the time. They were experts at making me feel like the difficult one, the one who was stuck in the past, the one who was preventing our new family from gelling. I was being gaslit in my own living room, made to feel unreasonable for wanting to see my own life reflected in the home I had spent my life creating. The injustice of it was a constant, low-grade fever. I would retreat to my bedroom, the last bastion of my former life, and listen to the sounds of them rearranging my world. Without my consent, I told myself I was being too sensitive. I told myself this was the compromise required to have family around me. But the loneliness I had so desperately tried to escape was creeping back in, and this new version was far more insidious. It was the loneliness of being invisible, of being a ghost in the vibrant, modern home my house was becoming. The assault on my emotional space was quickly followed by a strategic and devastating takeover of my financial independence. It was a masterclass in manipulation, performed with the loving concern of devoted children. They sat me down at the new glass dining table, the one that always had smudges on it, and presented a stack of my own bills, with grave expressions. Mom, we were just going through these, and we're worried, Tyler began, his voice a perfect symphony of sincerity and concern. You have so much to keep track of. The mortgage, the utilities, your insurance. It's a lot for one person to handle. Nancy placed her hand on my arm, her touch cool and proprietary. We just want to make life easier for you, she said. What if we consolidated everything? We could open a joint account, and we can manage all the household payments from there. Your pension can be direct deposited, and you'll never have to worry about missing a due date again. My heart sank. Frank had set me up so carefully, ensuring I would be independent and secure for the rest of my days. My finances were my last vestige of my autonomy, the one part of my life they hadn't yet. I'm perfectly capable of paying my own bills, I said, a defensive edge to my voice that I instantly regretted. Oh, we know you are, Margaret, Tyler soothed, his tone placating. This isn't about you not being capable. It's about us taking on some of the burden. It's what families do. We want to take care of you. They used my love for them, my desire for a harmonious family, as a lever to pry open my life. To refuse their help would be to accuse them of something nefarious. To admit that I didn't trust them, it would shatter the fragile peace. And so, worn down, and wanting to believe in the best version of my daughter, I agreed. The next day at the bank, Tyler did all the talking. He charmed the teller with a story about helping his aging mother with her estate plan. I signed the forms, my hand unsteady, adding both their names to my checking and savings accounts. And just like that, they had the keys to the kingdom. For the first month, they were meticulous. The bills were paid on time, but then the bank statements started to tell a different story. There were charges from expensive downtown restaurants, online shopping sprees for clothes in Nancy's size, a weekend getaway to a spa in Chicago that I certainly wasn't invited on. The withdrawals were disguised as household expenses or family needs, but I wasn't a fool. I knew my money was funding their increasingly lavish lifestyle. I tried to confront them, my voice shaking as I held up a statement showing a withdrawal of several $1,000s for home improvements. It had paid for the giant, wall-mounted television they now watched every night. "Tyler, what is this?" I asked. "We didn't discuss this. It's an investment in the property, Mom," he said, not even looking away from the screen. "It increases the value for all of us." The audacity of it left me speechless. My savings, the money Frank and I had scrimped and saved, was being used to improve a house they were living in for free, and I was being told it was for my benefit. I was no longer a person, I was the silent involuntary financier of a life, from which I was being systematically excluded. I was paying for the very decor that was erasing me, funding the very lifestyle that was marginalizing me. The injustice of it all settled deep in my bones, a cold, heavy stone of resentment that I was forced to carry in silence. My world, which had once been filled with friends, hobbies and community, had shrunk to the size of the chair in my bedroom. The isolation tactics that Nancy and Tyler had employed became more brazen, more cruel. They no longer bothered with flimsy excuses. They simply cut me off. The house phone, which I now realized they had set up to forward to Nancy's cell when they were out, rarely rang for me anymore. On the rare occasion a friend did manage to get through directly, Nancy would often hover nearby, making it impossible to have a private or honest conversation. My best friend, Monica, was the most persistent. She knew something was wrong. She started showing up at the house unannounced, trying to bypass the gatekeepers. The first time she did it, Tyler answered the door. I was in the kitchen and heard his smooth, practiced voice. "Monica, so good to see you. I'm so sorry Margaret is right in the middle of a nap. She's been so exhausted lately." I was wide awake, holding a cup of tea, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to run to the door and scream that I was a prisoner, but the shame held me in place. What would I even say? How could I explain that my own daughter was holding me captive? It sounded like the plot of a lurid television movie. Monica tried again a week later. This time, Nancy answered. Her approach was different, more insidious. "Oh, Monica." "Hi," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Mom's just having a bit of a confused day. Her memory, you know. The doctor said it's best to keep her environment calm and not have too many visitors. It agitates her." I stood at the top of the stairs, listening in horror. She was painting me as a senile old woman, incompetent and fragile. It was a lie, designed not only to keep Monica away, but also to plant a seed of doubt, to discredit me in case I ever did manage to cry for help. The lie was a masterpiece of cruelty. It simultaneously isolated me and destroyed my credibility in a single stroke. After that incident, Monica's visits stopped. I couldn't blame her. She was trying to respect what she believed were my medical needs, manipulated into compliance by my own child. The loneliness became a physical ache, a constant companion. I had invited my family in to fill the silence left by Frank, but they had replaced it with a different kind of silence, a cold, menacing quiet, filled with unspoken threats and the constant hum of their disregard for me. I was completely at their mercy, and they showed My days fell into a bleak, monotonous routine. I would stay in my room until I heard them leave for the day, then creep out to the kitchen to make myself some toast and tea. I would spend the day tidying up the house, washing their dirty dishes left in the sink, folding their laundry left in the dryer. I did it partly out of a lifetime of habit, and partly out of a desperate, pathetic need to feel useful, to somehow earn my keep in the home that was supposed to be mine. They treated me like an unpaid, invisible maid. They would walk past me without a word of greeting. They would discuss their plans for the weekend in front of me as if I wasn't there. I was no longer Margaret, their mother. I was a fixture, a piece of furniture that occasionally moved and breathed. The injustice was a slow-burning fire in my gut. I had given them everything: my home, my financial security, my love. In return, they had stripped me of my friends, my dignity, and my identity. I was trapped in a nightmare of my own creation, haunted by the ghost of the loving daughter I thought I had raised. The party was Nancy's idea, of course, a housewarming she called it, a full year after they had moved in. It was, I now realize, their official coronation, a public declaration that the house was now theirs, a celebration of their successful conquest. I was expected to play the part of the happy, benevolent matriarch, a quaint, smiling prop in the background of their perfect life. I was instructed to make my famous meatloaf sliders,
and my 7-layer dip, the very foods they had so recently deemed unhealthy and dated. My cooking, it seemed, was acceptable when it was for the benefit of their social climbing. The evening of the party, the house was filled with strangers, sleek, loud, laughing people Nancy and Tyler called their network. They moved through my home with an easy, proprietary air, setting their drinks down on tables I had polished, admiring the abstract art they had hung on my walls. I circulated through the crowd with my tray of sliders, my smile feeling like a brittle cracking match. I felt like a caterer at my own funeral. The moment of my public humiliation arrived. With a theatrical flourish, I was in the kitchen, refilling the chip bowl, when a group of Nancy's friends, all impossibly thin and dressed in expensive black dresses, came in laughing.
Nancy was with, and this is the kitchen, she was saying, gesturing around the room, as if she were a real estate agent, showing a property. We're planning to gut it next year, go for something much more open concept. Then one of the women saw me. Oh, is this your mother? She asked, her eyes flicking over my simple, classic dress, with a look of mild, anthropological interest. That's when Nancy did it. She looked at me, then at her friends, and she let out a peal of laughter, a sound that was both high-pitched and sharp as glass. Oh my God, look at what my mom is wearing, she said, her voice carrying across the room. It's like she stepped straight out of nine. The other women tittered politely. I stood there, frozen, the tray of sliders suddenly feeling impossibly heavy in my hand. Tyler, my son-in-law, chose that moment to walk in. He saw the scene, saw the look on my face, and instead of defending me, he joined in the mockery. Give her a break, babe, he said to Nancy, his voice dripping with a condescending pity that was far more insulting than her outright ridicule. She's trying her best, trying my best, as if I were a child who had put on her mother's shoes and was clomping around the house for their amusement. In that single brutal moment, surrounded by laughing strangers in my own home, something inside me broke. The part of me that had held on to hope, the part that still made excuses for them, the part that loved my daughter unconditionally. It all shattered and fell away, leaving behind a core of cold, clear, unshakable resolve. I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not defend myself. I simply looked at my daughter, at the stranger who wore her face, and I made a decision. I set the tray of sliders down on the counter with a quiet, deliberate thud. I turned, and without a word, I walked out of the kitchen. I walked through the crowded living room, a ghost passing through her own wake, and I went upstairs to my bedroom. I closed the door, and in the blessed sudden silence, I began to plan my revenge. They had laughed at my clothes. They had mocked my life. They were about to find out what it felt like to have nothing left but the clothes on their back. The party raged on downstairs, a cacophony of laughter and music that felt like it was coming from another planet. I sat on the edge of my bed, my hands folded in my lap, and I was not sad. I was not hurt. I was, for the first time in a very long time, completely and utterly calm. The humiliation had been a clarifying fire, burning away the last vestiges of the meek, accommodating woman I had been. In her place was a new woman, a woman with a plan. My first move was quiet and practical. I opened my jewelry box, a beautiful cherry wood box Frank had given me for our 20th anniversary. I bypassed the pearls and the sentimental piece. I took out the things that had real tangible value. A pair of diamond earrings my grandmother had left me, a solid gold watch that had been my father's, a few other pieces I had inherited over the years. I wrapped them carefully in a silk scarf and tucked them into the bottom of my purse. Next, I went to the small fireproof safe I kept hidden in the back of my closet. Inside were my most important documents. I took out the original unassailable deed to the house, the one with my name, Margaret Davis, as the sole legal owner. I took out my passport, my birth certificate, and my social security card. And most importantly, I took out the will, the one Frank and I had drawn up years ago, the one that left everything, the house, the savings, the entire estate, to our only child, Nancy. I looked at her name on the document, and I felt nothing but a cold, distant pity. I placed all of these documents in a large manila envelope and added them to my purse. My final act of preparation
was the most satisfying. I knew Tyler kept a spare key to his new, expensive SUV in the junk drawer in the kitchen. He was a creature of habit, and his arrogance made him careless. While the party was at its peak, while he and Nancy were holding court in the living room, I slipped downstairs. The kitchen was empty. I walked to the drawer, my heart pounding, a steady, resolute rhythm. The key was there, just as I knew it would be. I closed my hand around its cool metal, a small solid piece of my impending freedom. I went back upstairs. I packed a single, small overnight bag, a change of clothes, my toiletries, my medications. I did not take much. I was traveling light, shedding the weight of my old life. I sat in my room and I waited. I waited until the last of the guests had stumbled out into the night. I waited until I heard the sound of Tyler and Nancy, drunk and laughing, making their way up to their bedroom, my old bedroom. I waited until the house was finally blessedly silent. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I took my purse and my overnight bag, and I walked silently through the darkened house. I did not look back. I walked out the front door, closing it softly behind me. I drove through the deserted streets of Cincinnati, the city lights, a blur through my tear-filled eyes. But these were not tears of sadness. They were tears of pure, unadulterated liberation.
I had done it. I had escaped. I drove for 2 hours. My destination, a small, unassuming motel just off the highway. A place I had booked online with a prepaid credit card I had secretly acquired weeks ago. It was a clean, anonymous space, and it felt like a palace. The next morning, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to my best friend, Monica. When she heard my voice, she knew instantly that something had happened. "Margaret, are you okay?" "I'm better than okay, Monica," I said, and I was surprised by the strength in my own voice. "I'm free, and I need a lawyer." Monica, ever my loyal and practical ally, didn't hesitate. "I know just the person," she said. My second call was to a used car dealership in a neighboring town. I sold the SUV, Tyler's pride and joy, for a fraction of what he had paid for it. I took the cash and deposited it into a new bank account I had opened under my own name. The first phase of my counteroffensive was complete. I had assets, I had an ally, and I had a plan. I met with the lawyer Monica recommended, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Albright. The following day, I laid out my story, my evidence, the bank statements I had secretly printed, the notebook where I had documented their cruelty, and the original unassailable deed to my house. Ms. Albright listened, her expression growing colder and more furious with every word. When I finished, she looked at me with a mixture of professional outrage and personal empathy. "Margaret," she said, her voice like steel, "what they have done is not just a moral failing, it is a legal one. This is financial exploitation, emotional abuse, and illegal tenancy. We are not just going to get them out of your house, we are going to make them pay." Her words were a validation, a confirmation that I was not crazy, not bitter, not hysterical. I was a victim of a crime, and I was about to become a plaintiff. The first legal document Ms. Albright drafted was a new will. I sat in her office, and with a steady hand, I disinherited my daughter Nancy. I struck her name from the document that had once promised her a future of security and ease. In her place, I named a single beneficiary, a local foundation that provided housing and support services for elderly women who had been victims of abuse and neglect. My pain was going to become someone else's salvation. The next phase of the plan was the house itself. "We are not going to file for a messy eviction," Ms. Albright explained. "That gives them time to fight, to delay. We are going to do something much cleaner. We are going to sell the house right out from under them." The audacity of it took my breath away. While they were living in their house, nursing their hangovers from the party, they would be completely unaware that the very ground beneath their feet was being legally sold. We hired a discreet real estate agent who specialized in pocket listings. He presented himself to Nancy and Tyler as an appraiser from the bank, sent to conduct an evaluation for a home equity line of credit. They, blinded by their own greed, bought it complete. They proudly gave him a tour of the house,
pointing out all the upgrades they had made with my money. They were unwittingly acting as sales agents for their own downfall. I waited, my days a tense mixture of hope and fear. I stayed hidden, moving to a small, furnished apartment in a town an hour away. I was a ghost, orchestrating my own resurrection. They had no idea where I was. Their frantic, angry phone calls went unanswered. Their world was beginning to tilt, and they had no idea that I was the one controlling the axis. The offer on the house came from a young family who loved its classic charm and large yard. It was a full cash offer, and they wanted to close in 2 weeks. The closing was a quiet, surreal affair at Ms. Albright's office. I signed the documents that transferred ownership of my home to a new family. The check I received was for a sum so large, it seemed like a fiction, but it was real. It was the tangible proof of my reclaimed power. Now, all that was left was the final devastating act of my quiet, meticulous revenge. We decided that the new owners would be the ones to deliver the news. It was cleaner, more final. They were not being evicted by a scorned mother. They were being displaced by the cold, hard reality of a legal property sale. The new family, the Wilsons, were scheduled to arrive with their moving truck at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning. At 9:15 a.m. that morning, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I knew. I took a deep breath and answered. Mom. Tyler's voice was a raw, ragged shriek of pure, unadulterated panic.
What did you do? There's a moving truck in the driveway. A family is here with a deed. They're saying they bought the house. I let the silence stretch for a moment, savoring his confusion, his terror. I sold the house, Tyler, I said, my voice as calm and clear as a winter morning. It was my house to sell. I could hear Nancy screaming in the background, a wild, keening sound of disbelief. You can't, Tyler yelled, his voice cracking. This is our home. We live here. No, dear, I said, my voice quiet, but laced with steel. You lived there, as my guests, and the party is over. The people on your porch are the new legal owner. They have a court-ordered notice for you to vacate the premises immediately. I suggest you comply. You planned this? He whispered, the dawning horror in his voice, the sweetest music I had ever heard. You were right, Tyler, I said softly. I was trying my best to get my life back. Goodbye. I hung up the phone. The queen had not just reclaimed her castle, she had sold it, disinherited the princess, and moved on to a new, more peaceful kingdom. The aftermath was a spectacular display of public humiliation. Tyler and Nancy were forced to frantically pack their designer clothes and minimalist furniture into a rented U-Haul, while the entire neighborhood watched. Their kingdom, built on a foundation of my stolen money and their boundless arrogance, had been publicly dismantled in a single morning. They were forced to move into a cheap, extended-stay motel, their credit ruined, their social standing in tatters. They had tried to erase me, and in the end, they were the ones who had been rendered homeless and insignificant. I sit on my new balcony now, a cup of coffee, warming my hands, and I watch the sun rise over the Ohio River. My life is small and beautiful, curated not by my daughter's aesthetic, but by my own sense of peace. I bought a lovely, manageable condominium in a quiet complex with a community garden and a library. It is not the large house of my past, but it is a home, and every inch of it is mine. I have reconnected with my friend. Monica and I have our weekly bridge games again, and the laughter is a healing balm to my soul. I have found new purpose. I used the money from the sale of the house and the assets I reclaimed to establish the Margaret Foundation, a non-profit that provides legal aid and emergency housing to elderly victims of familial abuse. My daughter's greatest insult has become my life's most meaningful work. I have not heard from Nancy or Tyler directly since their world imploded. I heard through the grapevine that they eventually divorced. Nancy apparently moved to Seattle to start over. Tyler is still in Cincinnati, working a menial job, a ghost of the successful man he so desperately wanted to be. A few months ago, I received a letter forwarded from Monica. The handwriting was Nancy's, a shaky, looping scrawl. It was a long, rambling letter,
filled not with apology but with a litany of her own hardships. Her life was so difficult, she was so lonely. It ended with a single, stunning sentence. After everything, I think you owe it to me, to help. I read the letter, and then I did something the old Margaret would never have done. I laughed, a real, deep, genuine laugh. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it was almost impressive. I took the letter, walked over to the paper shredder Monica had given me as a housewarming gift, and I fed it into the machine. I watched as her words, her entitlement, her complete lack of self-awareness, were turned into a meaningless confetti of paper. My help, my love, my resources, they were no longer hers to claim. I had found new places to invest my heart. I had found myself. My story is not one of revenge. Not really. It is a story of reclamation. It is the story of a woman who was told she was a punchline and remembered she was the one who wrote the whole damn show. It is a story about the quiet, unshakable power that comes from knowing your own worth, even when those closest to you have forgotten it. I am not a victim. I am a survivor. And as I watch the morning light spill across my garden, I am filled with a profound and lasting peace. They laughed at my clothes, but I was the one who got the last laugh, and a whole new wardrobe.